Wow. That was awesome, wasn't it? I taught him everything he knows on the dance floor. So. You do not ever want to see me dance.
Amen.
Amen. Someone who knows, this is the one thing, Denise and I get along pretty well. In 40 years, we've managed to work out our differences. Boy, Denise cannot get me on the dance floor, and that's still, it's hard for her. So maybe if I could dance like 1/10 as good as that, I would feel comfortable. So my life's not over yet. We can always hope, yeah?
Lessons to be learned.
Lessons to be learned, exactly. Well, I'm very excited to share this message with you today. Have you had a time in your life that was such a turning point that it was like after that turning point, everything looked different? Yeah? And this was such a thing that happened. Goes back like 15 years. And not only have I not forgotten the lesson of that awakened moment, but it has served me over time. And I do hope that sharing it with you today will be something that you can take with you. And when you're dealing with a crack in life, cracks in life, that's where suddenly you drop into some situation that you completely flummoxes you. You completely didn't see it coming. You completely believe there's been some huge cosmic mistake. This shouldn't have happened, and something really precious has been lost. I'm not talking about the little things, someone cutting you off on the highway or someone saying something rude to you. You can work those over pretty quickly. I'm talking about the ones where like your whole identity is tied in with something that you then lose or changes remarkably. And so such a thing is, I'm going to get into the story of how that came to me. But I want to begin by saying what I believe is the most important thing that we can do in our spiritual life. And it's very, very simple, or at least it can be expressed very, very simply. And I found a quote this morning by Anthony Machado, who is a Spanish poet, very spiritual guy. And he said that beyond living and dreaming, there is something more important, and that is waking up. Waking up. We need to wake up. And in fact, he went on to say that all of Jesus' words could be summed up in 2 words. Wake up. Wake up. And remember the disciples that he told them to stay awake, and he came back and they're crashed. And he was like, can't you stay awake even for a few hours? Well, I sometimes haven't been able to stay awake even for a few minutes. You know what I'm saying? Falling back into the forgotten sense of who and what I really am, and back into the contracted sense of a vulnerable person who doesn't feel like he has any capacity to deal and to pivot and to flex and to move and to change and to make choices. Has anyone else had that experience where you... Just me. Okay. Oh, good. Thank you. I always hoped if 2 or more gathered in that understanding helps me feel that I'm not the only one having a human experience. And of course, that's really what it is. But it isn't the end of the story. And so we don't beat ourselves up when we fall into a crack in life and we are sad and that we're depressed and we're grieving. These are normal human reactions and normal human emotions. It's not to say that we just do some kind of a spiritual bypass, and as soon as something bad happens, we got to go to the super positive affirmations and say, it's all good, it's all God, yay, yay, yay. In the meantime, there's a big part of us that's needing to be nourished. It's needed to be listened to, and we have to do that. At the human level of who we are, we have to bring compassion to our hurt. We cannot bury our hurt, because if we bury our hurt, guess what? It comes up the next time when you're dealing with your spouse or your significant other or someone at work. If you are hurting, you need to give yourself the time and space to work with it. But what I'm talking about today is once you've done that work, once you have given yourself that loving understanding and compassion, then there's a time when you have a choice as to whether you're going to contextualize that particular thing in your life, that loss in your life, that situation that's been so difficult, that seeming adversity that seemed to be so against you, whether you can contextualize it in a spiritual context in which you can understand that although it might be against you at the level of your humanity, it can absolutely be a spiritual boon for you. It can actually be a spiritual opportunity unlike any other. And that instead of thinking that life is against me, we can think that the life that I know to be the life that is not just rising and falling, that comes and goes, that's having a good day, having a bad day, not that life, but the life with a capital L, this being that we are, that didn't start with your physical life, and it won't end with your physical life when you lay your body down. That life has not been affected by these cracks, by these traumas, by these things that happen to us. And that is the good news. That's why Jesus said, there will be trials and tribulations in your life. He didn't say, if you had dysfunctional family upbringing, there will be trials and tribulations. Or that you have, bad neighbors, or you get into a dysfunctional relationship with someone. He said it was a universal. He was describing the human experience, the ups and downs of life, the one that you're familiar with, the one that your parents told you about their ups and downs in their times, and then their grandparents told you about when the stock market was up and the stock market was down, and when there was war and when there was peace, and all the rising and falling. That is the nature of this three-dimensional world. That's why he said there will be that, so that you wouldn't be like thrown back and like, oh my God, something terrible has happened here. But that you would somewhat have some sense of going, okay, well, yeah, that's part of this life. But he didn't end there, and this is where we don't want to end, is that be of good cheer, because there is an overcoming power. There's an overcoming power. And it wasn't just in Jesus, because he said, these things that I have done, so shall you do, and greater things shall you do, because you are an infinite expression of the one. The same that I am, you are. I may be a little bit farther along in the awareness department, but the same potential is in you. And that's why Jesus said, and that's why the Buddha said, there will be trials, and there will be sorrows, and there will be joys in your life. But that isn't the end of the story. But the surface mind, the ego mind, sometimes can get stuck there. You can get stuck in the crack. And when you feel like you're stuck in the crack, when you're in a crack, you have no capacity for all the ways that you might be able to get out of the crack or have a different experience in the crack. Like if I'm in a tight space, right now, if the walls came in all directions, I would not be able to pivot, would I? I wouldn't be able to turn this way or that way. I wouldn't be able to turn around and look in another direction. I wouldn't be able, when we get in that place, we don't feel like we have any choice. And if we can't move and we don't have any choice, we don't have any capacity for seeing any differently, then we realize that we have created a reality of our own making when we believe that we're stuck. And the spiritual principle is you're never stuck. You're never stuck. Because you are a spiritual being having a human experience, and the spirit of you and the spirit of me has infinite possibility of working in any situation, because it's not confined, it's not contracted, it's not conflicted, it's not restrained, it's not limited, it's not obstructed by the conditions of our life. So, I'm going to read a poem to you, and this is also by Anthony Machado, because I think it illuminates this idea about seeing things differently, which is oftentimes the starting point of our resurrection from a crucifixion of life. He says, last night as I was sleeping, I dreamt marvelous error, that a spring was breaking out in my heart. And I said, along which secret aqueduct, O water, are you coming to me, water of a new life that I have never drunk? Last night as I was sleeping, I dreamt marvelous error, that I had a beehive here inside my heart, and the golden bees were making white combs and sweet honey for my old failures. Last night as I was sleeping, I dreamt marvelous error, that a fiery sun was giving light inside my heart. It was fiery because I felt warmth as from a hearth, and sun because it gave light and brought tears to my eyes. Last night, as I slept, I dreamt marvelous air that it was God I had here inside my heart. I love this poem because what it speaks to is that there's this other dimension of seeing that lies below the surface mind, lies beneath the ordinary awareness that you and I have. It's Jesus called it the kingdom of God. It can be called infinite love. It can be called the Atman of the Hindu tradition. It can be called, the great self or the higher purpose of self. All of those things are describing this that is behind the eyes, that is not just connected to the senses by which we often rely upon to give us a reality check, which has been called consensual reality. Consensual realities. That's what everyone would say. It's raining. Oh, that's such a bad thing, Or we all have our opinion about politics and what's good and what's bad, and and all of the ways that we have this sort of mass consciousness that we just all sort of agree, and it's all based upon this sensory experience that if we like it, it's a thumbs up, and if we don't like it, it's a thumbs down. And this is what Jesus warned about. He said, don't judge by appearances, but by righteous judgment. And righteous judgment is this deeper sense of reality, this willingness to be able to look at life and look beyond the mortal sensory way of evaluating life and understand that there is a deeper dimension of life in which we live and move and have our being. And it's in that awareness of that self, that being, that we have the capacity to be in the cracks of life and not shrink and not be limited and not suffer. Anyone tired of suffering besides me? I mean, some of us have taken that on. And, there are some spiritual paths in which suffering is sort of exalted. It's like, sort of the carrying the cross of life is sort of like that if you suffer, that if you humble yourself and that you suffer, that you sort of take yourself to the point of where Jesus was, or, the martyrs of the world. And I don't believe that's what the master teachers would say. I think Jesus would say, as he says in A Course in Miracles, the journey to the cross was the last useless journey. But we don't have to take this journey of suffering. And I don't think we get any extra points in the expansion of our consciousness by holding on to a suffering mindset, yeah? So let me tell you the event that happened in my life and how I fell into the crack and how I got out. So this is a very short, quick, dirty version of it because we only have so much time today. I go into more expanded part of the story in the workshop, which is next Sunday. But for purposes of this, I can give you the lowlights and the highlights, and I think you'll get it. So the point being here is that this was a huge disappointment that befell because Denise and I were called into ministry, as you all know. And this started 25 years ago. And so, when you get called to something, and you know this, if this has happened to you, it often belies your rational mind, right? I mean, when you're called to something, it's a heart trip. It's not a rational trip. It's not like, oh, we've figured it all out. We have exactly the right amount of money. We will do this, and we'll do this, and blah, blah, blah. We had a very sketchy plan, shall we say, that we said, we're putting into play because there was something bigger than our worry, fear, and doubt that propelled us to do this. And it was that impulse we both felt that kept us from pulling back and saying, we can't do this. And as it turns out, it worked out beautifully. Everything fell into place. I sold my business. We sold 2 cars in one day. Everything we needed to do to smooth out this path for us to go into ministry. And so I went and became the senior minister. Denise went I'm backing up. We went to ministerial school, and I got ordained. Denise became a licensed teacher. We got into our first ministry. We were there for 5 years, and we were done. We'd done our work. We were clear. We were ready to move on. We had plenty of time, 6 to 8 months of beginning to look for our next church. the universe, just as it had, made way for us before, that this was going to be a smooth and, grace-filled dance into our next opportunity, became a dead end. And we applied to all of these churches, this one included, this is 2001, and a number of great churches, and we kept getting very, very close, like right here. No, that's not it. It's not it. But we got in second place, and we would love to have you, but we chose someone else. Okay, great. And then it got to the point where we had used all of our resources to get through ministerial school, and then we're at a meager wage at our first ministry. And we thought, we're unemployed, and our lease is up, and we have a camper trailer that's paid for, and that's our plan. So once again, it looked a little thin, and we went off, and we went up to Lake Tahoe, and we loved, we camped for a couple of weeks. And then we went to the church in Lake Tahoe and said, how about if we speak on Sunday? And they go, oh, we'd love to. We'll give you $150. And we went, yes, food for the week. And that's really was the crack. It wasn't really the deep crack. That was just the sort of the kick in the pants. But then a month went by, and then another month went by, and still no job. And all of the indications that, that this should work out, because we were getting responses, and why don't you come and talk to us, and we love to have you, but we'll see. And then, and I came from, voted the best speaker in my class in seminary, and being given all these grand egoic ideas about how easy it was going to be for me to go out and, find a job. And then Denise and I, like, oh, what the perfect couple. I mean, who wouldn't want us, right? We were young and beautiful. I mean, she's still beautiful, but it happens. So what happened was that I got to the point where I was arguing with the universe. Something cosmically wrong has happened here. How can this be? Have you ever done that? Have you ever asked why? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. Especially when you feel like God has called you and you've had all the indications that this was right. And we got you. We got your back, man. Just go for it. Faith, trust. Yeah, well, what about now? So that deal's off, So somehow God has left the building. God has run out of faith in my life. And now what? And that's how I felt. And I know it's funny now, but then it was like devastating. Do you understand? I was about as depressed as a person could be. And it wasn't just because of our circumstances. There was this question that deepened the suffering, and it was why? Ooh, stay away from the why. Because, even if you had a approximate cause, like something that's close to why this happened, you don't even know what led up to that one, and you don't know what preceded that one, and you don't know what preceded that one, so you never really know why anything happens. The why turns into a whine, and it's perpetual. And so one day, my 8-year-old son and I were walking up we were living in Lake Tahoe, and walking up the mountain path. We were going up to a waterfall that looked down onto Emerald Bay. And it was a wonderful day. It was a perfect day. But I was running that story. When something is big in your life, you can't quite get it out of your mind. And even though you should be out there being present with Mother Nature, it's like, and so an 8-year-old helps, because, hey, Dad, look at this, so that would kind of break me out of it. But after a while, we got tired, or he got tired, which we're always grateful when you're an adult, when your child gets tired. Can we rest, Dad? Oh, yes, son. If you need to rest, let's sit. So we sat down on this very high up above almost above the tree line. And so we sat down on a great big granite slab. And normally, these things you wouldn't see if you're not really yearning for an answer. But I was like yearning for an answer. I was looking for some sign. And so we sat down, and I look at this slab in front of me, and there's a big crack running through it, and there out of the crack was growing this beautiful little fern plant. And it was perfectly formed. It was like a little Boston fern. And it was like a 4-inch miniature version of a perfect fern. And I thought, oh, wait a minute. And my mind began to analyze this and question, how is it that this little fern could be growing in this condition? I couldn't even see any soil down in this crack. And I thought, if this happened to a human, and I know some like this, what would happen when we drop into that crack? It would be like looking down on the forest floor going, why couldn't I land it down there with all the other beautiful ferns and the perfect growing conditions, the shade and the loamy soil, it's all there. I mean, that would be really supportive of my growth. But no, I drop into this crack way up in the mountain. How did that even happen anyway? I mean, how could the wind blow it up hundreds of feet? I mean, really, that was really a cosmic mistake. That shouldn't have happened. But fortunately, the fern didn't have that lesson for me. It had a different lesson. And its lesson, that it's not programmed like we are, it's not conditioned to make stories up about its own situation or about its fate. It has no capacity to do that. It only has one capacity, and it's a singular one thing that it knows, and that is to respond to how it's encoded. What is in its DNA, what's in the seed that provides for its expansion, that provides for its germination. That, in other words, it is encoded to grow regardless of where it finds itself. It never has a story that it clings to that says, I shouldn't have been dropped here. This shouldn't have happened. It only reverts back to its primary purpose, which is to grow. And I didn't miss the lesson, because what I was doing was, instead of being aware of all the capacity that I had within me, taking inventory of everything that I still had, this beautiful wife, this beautiful family, living in Lake Tahoe, California. We had food to eat that day. We weren't starving. We had all of these blessings, and all I could think about was what was missing, how I wasn't being actualized into my, great career that I should be experiencing at this point in my life. And you know what? When you measure what's missing, you always come up short. When you measure what's missing, you always come up short. And I was coming up short every day, and I was getting more and more depressed. But when you reverse that, and you start to think, what do I have? Taking inventory of what you still have. You have a good mind. Your body is healthy, etc. What can you do? What can you do besides ministry? Begin to open your mind. Open your heart. And I began to share with other people. And within a very short time after that, and this had been months of nothing, I found a job. And it wasn't a great job, but it was a job. And it would put food on the table. And it would begin to give me a sense that I am a productive member of society again. I'm not a half-baked, a fern hanging on the side of a mountain, with a story. I'm someone who is engaging in life and using the gifts that I have. And that led to another job and a better opportunity and a better opportunity. And before long, I was working, and I was assistant to the department head at Barton Hospital. And it wasn't because I did anything other than say, what can I do? Not, how can this have happened to me? So the lesson for this is that, we can't control everything that happens in our life. And I don't know what's going to happen in your life, but I guarantee a year from now, your life, every one of you, your life will look different than it does right now. That there will be something significant that will happen, and hopefully it will be greater and greater things will be full. But if it's not, if it's something that feels like it has diminished you at the level of your expectation, what you thought should happen, and it doesn't happen, and you feel diminished by that, I suggest you come to this workshop next Sunday at 1 o'clock, because we're going to walk through a process that will help you contextualize whatever that crack is in your life, in order for you to be able to see how it is connected squarely with your highest purpose in this life. So that instead of being something that is limiting you, you will see how it's a spiritual boon, how it will be a spiritual value to your life, and that you will not see your life the same way after that. It's what it did for me. I think it's done it for many other people who have taken this path. It's not original thinking. It is my own path. And I will share it with you with the same authenticity that I'm sharing this message with you today. It's an opportunity for us to exceed what the expectations are at the human level and to find ourselves in this promised land, which is the possibilities that are always unlimited, always unlimited. And there are countless stories of people who have done this. I have a very minor example of what's been done, but the stories in Scripture and everyday stories of people who overcome are filled with this notion that you are not what happens to you. It's how you respond to what happens to you that makes all the difference in the world. So we're going to learn how we can do that and tie it into something that's even more powerful than your desire for life to be a certain way on the outside. And when we hook up with that purpose, it will propel us through the suffering and the yeah buts and all of those things that seem to hold us back. And when you have that in play, then you've got the whole universe on your side. You don't feel like you're a victim anymore. You don't feel like you're alone in this terrible situation. You feel like you have said yes to the whole universe to conspire to help you grow, not as a result of this crack, but letting this crack open you up, break you open to the possibilities that have been beyond your senses to behold. So I hope you'll join me next week, 1 o'clock in the sanctuary. It's going to be exciting. We're going to film it. And just in case something happens in here that we want to see again, which I think we will. So thank you for listening today. God bless. Namaste. Thank you.